Survey research is a kind of quantitative approach that has two important characteristics: self-report measurement and large sample. Now, the goal of survey research is to obtain like a snapshot of a group at a particular time. And surveys are commonly used, especially by like various businesses, various companies, to try to get an accurate depiction of what their customers look like and what their customers want from their services. Now, I'm sure you have participated in numerous surveys yourself, and if you have, then we would call you a respondent because you responded to the survey. Now, most survey research is non-experimental, descriptive kind of research. What I mean is we use it to try to describe single variables, like how much do you enjoy Pepsi, or how much do you agree with a politician. Or we can use it to also assess relationships between variables, but that's not as common. You can also use surveys for experimental research. Like, for example, you could give one group of participants one form of a survey and another group a slightly different form of a survey and see how those slight differences could affect their responses. Or maybe you give both groups the exact same survey, but you treat one of the groups a little bit differently somehow. So there's a lot of potential here for using a survey in pretty much any experimental design. Now, survey research has become a huge part of our modern culture, but it hasn't always been used. We saw the beginnings of survey research in English and American social surveys that were conducted around the turn of the 20th century. And the researchers, what they basically wanted to know about were the extent of social problems such as poverty. So this is like the beginnings of census taking, basically. And over time, the government found new ways to collect this data and applied it for new purposes. By the 1930s, the US government was conducting surveys to document economic and social conditions in the country because we had this need to draw conclusions about the entire population. It was very important for policy making purposes in order to understand who the people were. And this helped to spur advances in how we go about conducting surveys, like how we go about collecting samples. Now, one of the biggest watershed events of survey research was the presidential election of 1936 between Alf Landon and Franklin Roosevelt. If you've never heard the name Alf Landon before, that's because he didn't win. Roosevelt won. But the interesting thing was a lot of people thought Landon was going to win because of these kinds of surveys that were being done at the time. A magazine called Literary Digest predicted Landon would win in a landslide based on results from a straw poll that they did of millions of Americans. Now, they weren't the only people doing this kind of political polling. Other pollsters used other methods, much more scientifically valid methods, such as the Gallup poll, which we still have today. And obviously, as I said, this straw poll Literary Digest did, it must have had some kind of problem because Landon obviously didn't win. Certainly wasn't a landslide victory for him. But we'll come back to this. So this brings us to our modern day. So a lot has changed over the course of survey research's history. I'm not going to go into all the little details, but we've just had all these little advancements over time to try to understand better, the ways to conduct this kind of research, the ways to get a representative sample, not just in political science, but in sociology and public health and many other fields as well. Psychology in particular has made numerous important advances in questionnaire design by doing various experiments to see how like item put the response item order could affect a person's responding, or just the overall layout of a survey can affect a person's responding. We've developed much more, valid, much more reliable methods for collecting participants' honest responses. This has led to things such as the Likert scale, which I'll talk about in a separate video. But yeah, we've used survey research for a wide range of purposes in psychology. Just to name a few, we've learned quite a lot about mental disorder and the causes of mental disorder and the symptoms and how it affects the loved ones and the family and the friends. So there's definitely a lot of potential when using survey research to try to understand what's going on in the individual. But just to wrap it up, going back to that political survey, the Literary Digest thing I mentioned, the thing they did wrong, and the thing I'm going to go into more detail about in next videos, is sampling problem. They had a significant sampling problem here. So basically, they only collected data from a particular subgroup of the population, namely the very rich in the country. And the rich individuals, they all supported Landon because, he offered things that they wanted. So if it was up to only the rich people in our country, Landon would have won.